What if I told you the most feared ground unit in American military history wasn't built in a training facility? It was built in disasters, defeats, freezing temperatures that killed men where they stood, jungle heat that cooked them alive, beaches where the Navy dropped them off and left. The 1st Marine Division didn't become legendary because things went right. It became legendary because everything went wrong, and they won anyway. This is that story. And it starts not with glory, but with a mutiny, a shoestring budget, and an island nobody had ever heard of. It starts, as most American military stories do, with arrogance. At the turn of the 20th century, the U.S. Navy had a problem. Its overseas empire had exploded. The Philippines, Cuba, Guam, a dozen other territories scattered across the globe. And managing all those bases was a headache the Navy did not want to deal with. So they did what powerful institutions always do. They created someone else to deal with it. In 1901, the Marines stood up a small battalion, 4 companies, tasked with maintaining America's far-flung outposts. By December 1913, this had grown into the 1st Advanced Base Brigade, the direct ancestor of what would become the 1st Marine Division. They spent their early years in the Caribbean and Central America, kicking around places like Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Veracruz, and Cuba, what history politely calls the Banana Wars. They were not yet legendary. But they were learning something that would matter enormously later: how to land on a hostile shore and take ground fast. Every amphibious operation, every contested beach, was filing down their instincts into something sharp. They just didn't know yet what they were being sharpened for. On February 1st, 1941, aboard the battleship Texas, the 1st Advanced Base Brigade was formally redesignated the 1st Marine Division, a combined arms formation: infantry, tanks, engineers, paratroopers, artillery. Built for war, and war, as it turned out, was already on its way. Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. In an instant, everything changed. But for the 1st MarDiv, the frustration was almost worse than the attack itself. They were scattered across the Pacific, garrisoning islands, standing watch, watching the Navy fight a war they couldn't get into. While the fleet clashed at Coral Sea and Midway, the Marines sat, waiting. Then, in the summer of 1942, intelligence arrived that made everyone's stomach drop. The Japanese were building an airfield on a jungle island in the Solomon Chain. If that airfield became operational, it would threaten the entire Allied supply line to Australia. The island's name was Guadalcanal, and the 1st MarDiv was going in. What they were not told, or rather, what their commanders chose not to fully confront, was that the division was going in under-equipped, undersupplied, and undertrained for what awaited them. Their rifles were bolt-action Springfields. Their ammunition ran to about 10 days. Their general supplies, which should have covered 90 days of combat, had been slashed to 60. One Marine grimly called the operation what it was: a shoestring. August 7th, 1942. Bad weather, no moon. A Japanese reconnaissance aircraft passing directly overhead that somehow missed the entire American fleet below. The Marines hit the beach, some landing on Guadalcanal itself, others going for nearby Tulagi and Gavutu Tanambogo. On Tulagi and Gavutu, the Japanese fought hard, and the Marines paid in blood, particularly the 1st Parachute Battalion, who landed in the open and were shredded by crossfire from 2 islands simultaneously, losing 10% of their force in hours. But on Guadalcanal proper, the main body encountered something almost more unsettling than resistance. Nothing. The Japanese garrison had simply run. By 4 in the afternoon of August 8th, the Marines owned Henderson Field, named after a pilot killed at Midway. They had the airfield. But what came next would test them in ways that no training, no banana war, no intelligence briefing had prepared them for. The Navy left. The carriers pulled out. Admiral Fletcher worried about air attack and fuel, and the transports, still half full of supplies, followed. The Marines woke up on August 9th on a jungle island in the South Pacific, surrounded by ocean, with 10 days of ammunition, 2 meals a day, and 50,000 Japanese soldiers somewhere in the surrounding darkness, who very much wanted their airfield back. The Japanese didn't waste time. They sent Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki, the same officer whose missing soldier had triggered the Marco Polo Bridge incident in 1937, the spark that set China on fire, to retake Henderson Field. He had 900 men. The Marines had over 10,000. Ichiki's own intelligence told him the Americans were numerous, and that a direct assault should be avoided. He chose to ignore it. He led his elite troops straight toward the airfield, and when he ran into Marine positions at the Tanaru River, he didn't hesitate. He sent 100 men charging across an open sandbar directly into Marine machine guns and mortars. In under an hour, they were gone. He sent 200 more. Gone. He sent a third wave. Gone. By then, the Marines had stopped waiting. The 1st Regiment's 1st Battalion swung around behind Ichiki's remnants and compressed what was left of them into a killing pocket. Tanks from the 1st Tank Battalion rolled in. The division commander later said the rear of the tanks looked like a meat grinder. Out of Ichiki's 900, roughly 30 survived. Ichiki himself reportedly burned his regimental colors and died in the fighting. The Marines lost 40 men. The Japanese High Command, receiving this news, did not pull back. They escalated. What followed was months of relentless pressure, naval bombardment at night, air raids during the day, Tokyo Express runs bringing more Japanese soldiers ashore in the darkness. By September, Major General Kawaguchi had landed 6,000 troops and launched a 3-column night assault on Henderson Field. The Marines, running on 2 meals a day and racked by dysentery, 1 in 5 men sick, held the line. It was chaos. Someone shouted that the Japanese were using poison gas. Someone else kept screaming the word retreat. Part of the line buckled. It was Lieutenant Colonel Edson, the Raider Battalion commander, personally appearing in the darkness and the noise and the confusion, who steadied his men and kept the position. Japanese bodies covered the hillside by morning. That ridge now bears his name forever. Edson's Ridge. The Japanese tried once more in October, bigger this time. 20,000 troops, 2 divisions. A plan that had already reported its own success to Tokyo before the attack even began. On the right flank, a Japanese battalion broke through, radioed back that they had taken the airfield. They had not, and then were destroyed when the sun came up. On the left flank, at the position of the 1st Battalion's 7th Regiment, a Marine sergeant named John Basilone went so far beyond the limits of what a human being should be able to do that his story sounds invented. His machine gun ran dry. He switched to his pistol. He repaired a 2nd machine gun under fire. His 2 gun sections held off a Japanese regiment of 3,000 men. When it was over, the Marines counted 2,200 to 3,000 Japanese dead against 61 to 86 of their own. In January 1943, the Japanese evacuated Guadalcanal entirely. The 1st MarDiv had won. They had won sick, hungry, half-supplied, and alone. And they were not done. Cape Gloucester, Peleliu. The division kept moving, kept landing, kept fighting, but nothing, not Guadalcanal, not the Tanaru, not Edson's Ridge, could have prepared them for what was waiting on a small coral island in the Palau chain in September 1944. Peleliu. The Navy bombarded it for 3 days with 5 battleships, 4 heavy cruisers, 3 light cruisers, and a dozen carriers. The naval commander declared there were no targets left to hit. He was wrong, because the Japanese had changed everything. No more banzai charges, No more defending the beach. They had gone underground, tunnels, bunkers, interconnected cave systems carved into coral ridges that no bombardment could touch. They were going to bleed the Marines dry, 1 yard at a time, in 47 degrees Celsius heat. The first MarDiv landed on September 15th. By the end of the first day, 200 were dead and 900 wounded, and that was just the first day. The 1st Regiment in the north was hit so hard their commander nearly died in the first hours. Division Commander Rupertus, incredibly, still believed the Japanese would collapse soon. They did not collapse. At a place called the Umerbrogal Pocket, the Bloody Nose Ridge, the 1st Regiment advanced so slowly, under such relentless sniper fire and cave-by-cave resistance, that a company of 90 Marines who fought their way to the top of Hill 100 were counterattacked, ran out of ammunition, and began throwing rocks. 9 men survived. The 1,000-strong 1st Regiment lost 1,749 men, 60% casualties. The 5th and 7th Regiments each lost roughly half their strength. It took Army reinforcements and another month of grinding before the last Japanese commander burned his colors, sent his final telegram, "The sword is broken," and ended his life. Total 1st MarDiv casualties, over 6,500. Rupertus went home and died of a heart attack 6 months later. The shadow of Peleliu followed him to the grave. Okinawa came next, the last great amphibious assault of the Pacific War. The 1st MarDiv attacked from the north, and for once, luck was on their side. The northern Japanese forces collapsed relatively quickly. But when the division moved south to relieve the shattered Army 27th Infantry Division, the killing resumed. Fighting for key high ground, losing men yard by yard, holding positions through counterattacks that came in waves, the division lost 1,655 killed on Okinawa. Hard numbers. And then, before the ink on the surrender documents was even dry, they were boarding ships again, not going home, going to China. September 30th, 1945. The 1st MarDiv lands at Dagu, Tianjin. They garrison Beijing, Hebei, Shandong. They have small frictions with People's Liberation Army units. They are, though nobody says it out loud yet, standing at the edge of a civil war that is not theirs. By September 1947, sensing correctly that staying would be catastrophic, the division withdraws entirely from China. But the men who had just left knew something in their bones. They would be back in Asia. They were right. September 15th, 1950. Incheon. The 1st MarDiv comes ashore in one of the most audacious amphibious landings in military history, punches through the North Korean defenders, and drives on Seoul. They take it. Then they ship to the east coast, land at Wonsan, and start marching north toward the Yalu River. The mood is almost celebratory. Commanders are talking about being home for Christmas. And then, in late November, near a frozen reservoir called the Chosin, the temperature drops to minus 38 degrees Celsius, and the Chinese People's Volunteer Army comes out of the mountains, surrounding the division entirely. Division Commander Oliver Prince Smith, a man who had fought at Cape Gloucester, a man who had seen what this division could do, was calm in a way that probably saved every life under his command. When a reporter asked him about the retreat, he said the words that became part of American military legend: they were not retreating. They were attacking in a different direction. Smith had been quietly stockpiling supplies and refusing to overextend his lines for weeks, over the objections of his superiors. When the encirclement came, the 1st MarDiv had what it needed to fight its way out. They did, at a cost of 900 plus killed, 3,500 plus wounded, and 6,500 cold weather casualties, a number that tells you everything you need to know about what a Korean winter in 1950 felt like to a human body. They reached the coast at Hungnam and evacuated by sea. They had come out of the coldest, most complete encirclement American forces faced in the entire war. And they came out fighting. For the next 2.5 years they fought up and down the Korean peninsula, repelling volunteer army offensives, taking losses at places like Madarill West Hill, grinding through the spring offensive of 1951. When the armistice finally came, the division's total Korean War bill read 4,004 killed and 25,864 wounded. Vietnam, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. The division keeps going. In 2003, first MarDiv units covered 808 kilometers in 17 days and took Baghdad. The tempo never really stops. The deployments keep coming. The division keeps absorbing them, processing them, and coming out the other side. So what exactly is this thing? It is the oldest division-sized unit in the United States Marine Corps. Its nickname is the Old Breed, a name that says everything about what it is and nothing about what it costs. Its motto is no better friend, no worse enemy. Its patch is a blue diamond with one word across the center, Guadalcanal. That word is not decoration. That word is a foundation. Every Marine who has ever worn that patch has worn it knowing that the men who built this division won their first battle on 2 meals a day, bolt-action rifles, 10 days of ammunition, and no Navy in sight. The weapons changed, the enemies changed, the geography changed. But the thing underneath it all, the thing that held the line on Edson's Ridge in the dark, that threw rocks on Hill 100 when the ammunition ran out, that punched through Chinese encirclement at -38 degrees, that thing did not change. It was never about the equipment. It was never about the numbers. It was about something the division had been building, quietly and at enormous cost, since a handful of Marines first stepped off a boat onto a hostile shore over a century ago. The Old Breed. No better friend. No worse enemy. The sword, as their enemies have learned repeatedly, is never broken.